She didn't cry. Not even at the funeral. But after that she became a stranger. From the first day after the funeral I waited for her to break down. Anna had always been good at keeping her emotions in check, but that evening she became something else. A stone. As if someone had switched off something alive inside her. In the first few days, silence reigned as if someone else had moved into our home. Her movements grew slow, precise. Even when she touched the iron, it was like a surgeon reaching for a scalpel. Not a single cup piled up in the sink. As if order could erase reality. I tried to talk to her that night. We lay side by side, but there was a chasm between us. The blanket was shared, but our bodies were strangers. "You're not alone," I whispered. She didn't answer. Just shifted her shoulder slightly as if she felt cold. But I knew she wasn't cold. My voice, my warmth, none of it reached her anymore. A few days later, I saw a new number in her notebook. Merrick, therapy, it said. I felt relief. At least someone would now hear her silence. But then I saw her smile while texting him. Not the smile she had with me. There was something soft, warm, as if her soul had returned, but not to me. I told myself it was okay. She was grieving, she was hurting, she needed someone she could speak to without a mask. But then one day I walked into the room and saw her rereading his message, touching her lips with her fingers. It hit me like a blow. I knew that gesture. She used to do it when remembering something tender. That night, I heard her sob again, a barely audible sound like a tree creaking under snow. I thought finally, she's crying. But when I got closer, I saw she wasn't crying. She was laughing. Quietly. Hollowly. She didn't look at me. Her phone screen was still glowing beside her. And his name, Merrick, shone brighter than any light in the house. I heard her talk to him. A voice I hadn't heard directed at me in a long time. I wasn't supposed to be home then. A migraine had hit suddenly like a blow to the temple, and I left work early. Came in quietly, took off my shoes, didn't turn on the hallway light. The house was silent, but not empty. Her voice drifted from the bedroom like the scent of perfume forgotten on a pillow. It was different. Not the tone she used when replying to my "How are you?" Soft. Smiling. Alive. That was the voice she once used with me. Before everything. Before death. Before this new, impenetrable Anna. That helped? Really? You were right. A pause. I could smell her in the room. And for the first time, I didn't burst into tears. My chest tightened as if the air had thickened. I stood in the hallway like part of the wall. And still I felt the crack spreading inside me. Slowly. Relentlessly. It wasn't just her voice. It was the part of her that had disappeared from our life and suddenly came alive for someone else. I didn't know pain could be so soundless. When I finally opened the front door noisily, on purpose, she had already ended the call. She came out of the bedroom as if nothing had happened. Hair tied up, face calm. As if there had been nothing. No words, no memory, no scent clinging to a stranger's voice. That evening she said she had a late appointment. I nodded. Didn't ask with whom. And she didn't explain. And that silence between us wasn't emptiness. It was an agreement. As if we both knew but pretended not to. Sometimes silence is louder than a scream. And I kept feeling like I was living in a house where my voice was no longer needed. She said she'd been at the clinic. But I saw her coat wet as if she'd been in the park. Saturday. A cold, heavy rain hung over the city like a gray sheet someone forgot to take down. The streets were empty. Even the pigeons hid under awnings. I sat by the window, holding a cup of tea, already cold, watching the drops slide down the glass, tracing the same paths over and over. When she walked in, it felt like the rain came in with her. Anna stood in the doorway, slightly out of breath, scarf pulled up to her eyes, her coat glistening with damp. Merrick's appointment ran late, she said, like someone repeating a rehearsed line. We talked about Mom. Mom. Always a reliable shield. Her death became a boundary. Everything changed after it, but now I was beginning to wonder, was it really because she was gone, or because of who stayed behind? I didn't reply. Just smiled. That empty smile that never reaches the eyes. Anna walked past me without taking off her coat. As if she was afraid to be in this house without a protective layer. I went to the bathroom. Just to retreat. To give myself a pause. Turned on cold water, washing my face with such force it was as if I could scrub off the exhaustion. And then I saw the coat. On the hook. It was dripping. Silently. Relentlessly. Wet from hem to shoulders. Not in spots or splashes as from a short dash from the car. No. This was the coat of someone who had walked through the rain for a long time. Slowly. As if they wanted to get wet. I froze. It wasn't just an inconsistency. It was the second face of her phrase. Outwardly, therapy appointment. Inwardly, a journey. To where? I returned to the kitchen. Anna was sitting at the table, slowly stirring her tea. The scent of ginger and honey was already filling the room. Her favorite. She looked tired. Or pretended to be. A blanket on her knees. Her bag beside her open, as always, carelessly. She looked at me as if she felt I had understood something. But she didn't ask. And I didn't ask either. When she went to shower, leaving behind a trail of steam and quiet humming, I approached the bag. Not like a thief. Like a husband trying to catch time before it falls apart. A napkin. Folded in half, its edges uneven. It smelled of her perfume, light, woody, the one she wore only on special occasions. But the scent wasn't the main thing. It was the writing. In someone else's handwriting. You're stronger than you think. Words written with care. Or affection. Definitely not a clinical reminder. This wasn't about a patient. It was about her. A woman. Alive. Tangible. To whom someone else had reminded she was more than her grief. I put the napkin back. The bag left exactly as it was. And stepped out onto the balcony without a coat. The cold pierced instantly. But outside felt warmer than the house. Sometimes you want the truth to be a mistake. For the wet coat to be a coincidence. For someone else's words not to mean what they clearly mean. But rain doesn't lie. It just falls. Like facts. Without explanation. Without mercy. He gave her a task to let go of the past. But it seems in doing so, she's letting go of me too. She was sitting right on the floor, legs crossed like a child who's been allowed to pull treasures out of the closet. Scattered across the carpet dozens of photographs. Mom with a mug of tea and a knitted throw. Us on our wedding day laughing in the window of a rented bus. Me in the kitchen, flour on my cheeks, trying to bake bread during lockdown. Austria. Berlin. A beach in Sopot. Puddles in Bremen. Our whole life spread out on the floor like a palette of feelings that no longer echo. I sat down beside her. She looked at me. Didn't pull away. But didn't move closer either. Between us, centimeters that once held habit, touch, breath. Now they held silence. Warm. Respectful. But foreign. Merrick said this would help, she said quietly, sorting through the photos. We have to relive every moment. And say goodbye. She picked up one photo, I recognized it instantly. Berlin. We had walked all night, lost the map, and drank mulled wine from a plastic cup. In the photo, I'm holding her hand, she's laughing with her head thrown back. It was before everything. Before the lines near her eyes. Before the diagnoses. Before the funeral. She looked at the photo and smiled. But it wasn't a smile to be shared. It was a farewell smile. Inward. Then she placed the photo in the box. On the lid, neatly written, let it be the past. I wanted to say something. Wanted to ask, am I going in there too? But the words didn't come. Because deep down, I already knew. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't cruelty. It was healing. Without me. She continued carefully, gently. Each photo a goodbye to a piece of herself. And a piece of us. I sat in silence. And felt myself becoming light, transparent. Like an old footprint in sand, still visible but without weight. Sometimes letting go doesn't look like a drama. It looks like a woman packing away photos in a box. And a man who doesn't stop her. I found the hotel receipt. 1 room. For 2. Not like her, too bold. I wasn't looking for anything. I just needed to step outside. The air in the house had become heavy. As if the walls had started breathing in my place. I threw on the first thing I saw, her coat. It was still hanging by the door with that same sharp scent in the collar, bergamot, musk, and something else, fresh. Not mine. Not Mom's. Not the past. When I reached into the pocket, I felt a thick fold of paper. Maybe a pharmacy receipt, I thought. Or a note. But when I unfolded it, my heart gave a short, sharp jolt. A receipt. A hotel on the outskirts of town. Lesnaya residence. Sounds respectable. Room 214. 1 night. The date, just a few days ago. Room type, double room, 1 bed. No meals. No parking. No names. I looked at that paper the way one looks at a photo with someone else's hand on your wife's waist. My fingers were trembling, but only on the inside. On the outside, silence. The same silence in which she now lives with me. I didn't tear it up. Didn't hide it. Carefully folded the receipt, just as she must have done. Put it back in the pocket. The fabric was warm, as if it still held the body it now belonged to. Dinner was cream soup. Her signature dish, light, thick, with a hint of nutmeg and cream. My favorite. Used to be. When I walked into the kitchen, she stood at the stove, back straight, hair pinned up. She was pouring soup into deep bowls. Everything was perfect. The tablecloth, the spoons, even a candle, thin, white, like the ones lit on nights of reconciliation. "You're just in time," she said, smiling. I nodded, sat down. We ate in silence, seasoned with her short remarks. Merrick suggested going for walks without a phone today. I read that article about neural patterns in grief. Really interesting. "You look tired. Everything okay?" I answered, briefly, neutrally. The words were there, but they carried nothing, because I was watching her hands, how they held the spoon, how she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Calm hands. Not the hands of a woman afraid of being exposed, but the hands of someone who no longer felt guilty, who had crossed the threshold, who had moved on. And then I realized this was no longer a lie. It was something else. A transition, a reconfiguration, a new orbit, one in which I no longer existed. After dinner, she said she was tired. I nodded, and stayed alone in the kitchen. Empty plates. The smell of soup still hung in the air. And in the pocket of her coat, the receipt, still there, as if it had been breathing while we ate. Sometimes betrayal isn't in a bed. Sometimes it's in the way someone looks you in the eyes, and no longer blinks first. Not quite a lie. Not quite the truth. Just not us anymore. I tried to scream, but stayed silent, and she stayed silent in return. I wanted to say, "I know," simply, quietly, without blame, as if a confession wasn't a sentence, but a recognition of pain. But my tongue clung to the roof of my mouth. Inside, thick, heavy silence. The kind that can't be healed by music or words. The kind that arises when you've endured too long, swallowed too much, looked away too often. When silence isn't weakness, but the last form of love. She sat at the table with a cup of tea. A white sweater, the one Mom gave her on our first Christmas together. Back then, she laughed, kissed my cheek, smelled of cinnamon and tangerines. Now, she sat straight, shoulders tense, her face like it was cut from paper. "How are you?" I asked, gently, almost in a whisper, though I knew I didn't want the real answer. "Stable," she said. She smiled, but the smile didn't touch her eyes. It wasn't emotion. It was a signal. "I won't let you in where things are real." I nodded, like a man who's been handed the wrong diagnosis but pretends to believe the doctor. And I left. The bedroom was dark. I didn't turn on the light, just closed the door, tight, without a crack, sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the mattress sink slightly beneath me. And only then I exhaled, deeply, heavily, like someone who'd been holding their breath since spring. Since the funeral. Since the moment she stopped touching me. Not because it hurt, but because I had become background. Silence is scarier than a scream, because it doesn't ask for an answer. It already knows there won't be one. I stared at the wall, at the wallpaper pattern that once seemed cozy, and now just reminded me of everything left unsaid. I wanted to say, I know about Merrick, about the hotel, about the napkin, about the voice I no longer hear addressed to me. But if I said it, everything would change. And I no longer know how to be without her, even though she's no longer with me. And so I said nothing. And on the other side of the door, it was quiet too. No footsteps, no words, no breath, just us, each in our own silence, where love is no longer warmth but echo, muffled, slow, unanswered. I don't want to know more, but I can no longer stay near. The night flowed like oil, thick, motionless. I lay awake, watching the streetlights glow slowly glide across the ceiling. Yellow squares moving, disappearing, reappearing, round and round, like us. Anna slept beside me, calmly, steadily. She breathed deeply, as if every breath was anchoring her in some new reality, one I wasn't allowed into. Sometimes the corners of her lips would lift ever so slightly, not quite a smile, but the shadow of one. I watched and thought, she's not suffering anymore, and I am not either. I simply remained. I didn't cry. I wasn't angry. I just lay there, as if everything in me was waiting for a command. What now? At dawn, I got up, quietly, no creaks, no door clicks, put on the first things I found. A jacket, unzipped, left the phone behind. I didn't know where I was going. I just left. Like you leave a church you no longer believe in. The streets were empty, like me. Birds cried somewhere far off, but the sound was muffled, as if underwater. I walked a few blocks until I reached the old park. Everything there was familiar but different. Like I was looking at my city through the eyes of someone who no longer lived in it. And then a bench, near the edge of the path beside some bushes. On the ground nearby, a dirty plush teddy bear. Dusty. One I'm missing. A seam split at the neck. Nobody needed it. But someone once held it, clutched it close, promised not to let go. I sat beside it. Not out of pity for the toy, but because, for the first time in a long while, I felt, here is someone who's not needed either, but still exists. I don't want to know anymore. I don't want to ask who he is to her. How many meetings, how many notes, how many touches happened while I pretended everything was stable. But I know one thing. I can't keep being the man who sits beside her pretending this is what love looks like. All I have left is silence, footsteps on morning pavement, and someone else's teddy bear. And maybe a tiny pulsing feeling. I still exist. I can still leave. She invited me to him. I went. To hear the truth from both of them. I didn't want to go. When she said, would you come to a session? Merrick doesn't mind, everything in me clenched. Why should I hear him speak about our life like he was part of it? But I went. Because I needed closure. Because I needed to know how the story ends, the one they stopped writing me into. The office was bright. Beige walls. Sandy armchairs. No personal touches. Everything like a sterile conversation. He stood when I walked in. Merrick. Younger than I expected. Short beard, composed voice, steady eyes. Didn't look away. Didn't explain himself. Anna was already seated. And not across from him. Not alone. She sat next to him. Like with someone who was with her. That said more than any words. Thank you for coming, he said. I nodded. Sat down. A pause. The kind that comes before something important. Before something inside you stops being yours. Anna went through severe trauma, he began. And in the moment she needed support, you weren't able to provide it. Those words entered quietly. But deeply. Not an accusation. A statement. Like a doctor saying, the heart stopped at 417. I wanted to stand up. Leave. Say, you don't know what I went through. I lost someone too. But I stayed. Watched how she held her hands clasped like a schoolgirl at an exam. This wasn't betrayal, she said. Softly. Without drama. This was survival. I looked at her. At the features I knew by heart. At the hair I used to tuck behind her ear when she felt anxious. At the mole beneath her eye, the one I kissed on our wedding night. And suddenly I realized I didn't know her anymore. The woman before me was a stranger. With the same face. The same voice. But a different center of gravity. She didn't belong to me. She didn't hide that. And I didn't try to get her back. Because along with that realization came another. I no longer held her. Not with memories. Not with photos. Not with soup or the ring she no longer wore. I just let go. Not out of nobility. But because holding on had become impossible. Merrick kept talking. About process. About acceptance. I wasn't listening. I just looked at her as at someone I once shared a life with. Now we didn't. And in the silence between us, there was no pain. There was emptiness. And in it, lightness. She stayed in the apartment. I went to a hotel. And for the first time in 6 months, I felt silence inside, not around me. The room was quieter than I expected. Not empty, just muted. Like a library where no one has borrowed a book in years. The window didn't face a park or a river, just rooftops. Tall, old buildings with metal pipes and satellite dishes tilted like the necks of tired birds. I sat on the edge of the bed and I didn't need to think. Because for the first time in months, there was no noise inside. No dialogue, no resentment, no replays of what she said or what I didn't say. Just silence. Pure. Like a freshly washed white sheet. I didn't tell her I'd left. She didn't write. No, where are you? No, have you eaten? No, can we talk? Only silence. But it didn't cut. It didn't hurt. It sounded like relief. I booked the room without using my name. Not in that hotel, not in that neighborhood, not in any coordinates of memory. There was no chance of running into her by accident. Even her reflection, impossible here. I opened my laptop. My hands instinctively navigated to an old playlist. Track titles triggered faint flashes, kitchen, glasses clinking, laughter, burnt toast. I hit play. By the third song, violins. I recognized them from the first note. A delicate, lyrical melody we once danced to barefoot in the living room under the light of a garland we bought for 100 rubles. It was late, we were drunk on wine and something more. The feeling that we were whole. Now I sat still. The song played, but I didn't listen. I just let it play. Like rain falling without meaning, yet always toward cleansing. This hotel had no past. No photographs. No smudges on the mirror. No sweater forgotten on the back of a chair. No trace of her scent in the pillow. Just me. I poured water into a plastic cup. Drank. Slowly. As if it were wine. I lay down. Not to sleep. Just to lie down. And I felt that the mattress no longer had a my side and her side. It just was. A car passed outside. An alarm howled somewhere in the courtyard. I didn't flinch. I breathed. The world didn't fall apart. It simply changed shape. And I remained in it. Without her. But not without myself. I didn't forgive. But I don't hate either. I just learned how to live again without us. A month passed. No sharp turns. No backslides. Life didn't get brighter. It didn't find rhythm. It just started moving. I didn't change my number. Didn't block her. But I didn't write either. The silence between us was no longer a pause, it was a full stop. And then one morning I found a letter. No stamp, no postmark. Just a plain white envelope, my last name written by hand. Which meant she brought it herself. Didn't call. Didn't come up. Just slipped it into the mailbox. I stood there with it in my hand, not opening it. The paper was warm from the sun. Thick. Not trembling, not damp. As if the letter wasn't asking for forgiveness, just speaking. I opened it. A few lines. Familiar handwriting, neat, like a schoolgirl's. Thank you for not breaking me back then. You could have, but you didn't. You gave me the right to choose myself. Even if that meant leaving you. I read it once. And I didn't cry. Didn't sigh. Just folded the paper. Carefully along the crease. And put it in the drawer. Not as a memory. As a document. A confirmation I survived. Now I'm sitting on the balcony. Morning coffee bitter as it should be. The sky gray but not heavy. The wind scentless. No trace of her perfume. I don't think. Don't analyze. Don't imagine where she is. Or with whom. I simply am. Without us. Without what if she had? I didn't forgive. I didn't forget. But I also don't hate. I became myself. Not the man I was before her. But the one who remained after. Sometimes victory isn't getting someone back. It's not holding on. Sometimes love ends not with a scream, not with blame, not even with forgiveness. But with silence in which you understand. I'm home again. In myself. And that is enough.